Hi, folks. It looks like we've had some technical difficulties with the lecture that I recorded for this week, so I wanted to just re-record so that everyone has access to the information that I think is important for you in order to complete your first writing assignment. So your first assignment, your major writing assignment due this week is your critical summary. And the reason I'm starting with a critical summary in this regard is that it's going to give you some really good practice in objectively presenting researched information. In other words, a summary has nothing to do with your opinion about an article or your opinion about what you've read, but it has everything to do with just a clear presentation of the facts at hand. So by now you've collected a number of sources to begin reading through for your paper, and this week you're choosing one of those sources, a source that's at least 15 pages long, that you're going to summarize for me in 250 words. So as you get going, I want to give you some tips and some hints that will help you to be successful this week. So I want you to pull out a piece of paper, open up Word on your laptop, whatever you need to do, and take a few short notes. I promise this won't take long, and hopefully this will help you to be really successful. These are 5 rules to keep in mind when it comes to summarizing a research material. The first rule is this, is that a summary should be short. That seems self-explanatory, I know. But a summary should be short. A good rule of thumb is that a summary should be about 100 to 150 words for every 7 to 10 pages or so. That's going to be a useful rule to keep in mind as you work on your annotated bibliography. This particular assignment, I'm giving you a little bit of extra leeway because I want you to have some practice summarizing. So for this piece, you're going to choose a 15-page article and you're going to summarize it for me in 250 words. And I'm using that as a very concrete boundary. I'll give you a 5-word grace period on each side, so you can have 245 words to 255 words. But the body of your summary, not including the title or the header, the body of your summary should only be 250 words. Now, why be such a stickler? Well, it's because if I put some concrete boundaries on there from the very beginning, it's going to force you to be concise and to get right to the point, and that's a really important skill to develop as you kind of begin to wade into research writing. So the first rule of thumb is that a summary should be short. It's short because it only focuses on the main points of an article. It's not going to get into all the nitty-gritty details. It's not going to get into all the questions of why and how and what and analytics. It has nothing to do with what you think of the data that's presented. It's just a representation of that data, an objective representation of that data. So a summary should be short. The second rule is that a summary should be inclusive. This is the rule that balances out the shortness, okay? As much as a summary just focuses on the main ideas, it's very important that your summary be well-rounded. In other words, when I read it, I should have a very clear picture of the whole article. It shouldn't just be a summary that focuses on the conclusions that were drawn. It should not just be a summary that's focused on just the data or just the methods by which the data was collected. It should give me a very clear picture of the whole article. This is really useful because when someone is coming to read a brief summary, and this is especially true when they read an annotated bibliography, they're reading it just to get a basic idea of what material is out there. So by summarizing it both quickly and inclusively, you allow your reader a really good glimpse, a holistic picture of what that article is about. So I want your summaries to be short, I want them to be inclusive, and I want them to be, this is rule number 3, thesis driven. Any paper within the realm of academics should always contain a clear thesis. In a summary, there's 3 things to keep in mind for that thesis. 1 is that the thesis should appear as the first sentence of your summary. That thesis should contain the author's name or names. And by the way, it's perfectly acceptable to refer to authors by last name only as opposed to first and last. You do not need to include titles, so if there's a PhD or a master's degree, those titles are not necessarily relevant to a summary. So the thesis should be the first sentence, it should contain the author's name, and it should contain the title of the piece that you're summarizing. In other words, I should be able to read the very first sentence of your paper and go, okay, this person is summarizing Dr. Smith's study on water retention, and then I should have an idea of what's to come, and I should know if that particular article or summary is relevant to what I'm looking for. The last hint I'll give you for your thesis is that the thesis should contain within it one statement that gives me the general point, the main point of that article. So in his article on water, entitled Water Retention, Smith argues, fill in the blank, period. Then you're going to use the rest of your summary to kind of support or elaborate, explain how Smith came to make that point throughout his piece. Okay, so again, the thesis should be the first sentence. It should contain the author's name and title of the piece, and it should contain a one-sentence statement of the article's main point. Okay, so a summary should be short, inclusive, thesis-driven. Rule number 4 is that your summary should not, under any circumstances, include direct quotes. Directly quoting someone is very useful in a research paper, and it's useful when you want to convey a point or convey a message or convey some information, and the author of the article says or communicates that information better than you can. Okay, but quoting deals with nitty-gritties. It deals with details, and it deals with data and questions and whatnot. A summary does not. A summary is not focused on those details. A summary is only focused on the big picture. So in that regard, the 2 skills, quoting and summarizing, are very different from one another. They're used for different reasons, and the 2 should not necessarily bleed together, especially in this particular assignment. Okay? So your summary should be short, it should be inclusive, it should be driven by a thesis, it should not contain direct quotes, and then rule number 5 is that it should do a very good job of referencing the author. What I don't want to happen in your summary is for many of the words, many of those 250 words, to be eaten up by in-text citations. So I want to give you a little hint that can help you with this assignment and with your research paper. When you're writing a summary, it's very important to attribute every piece or every movement of the summary, every piece of information back to the author from whence it came, okay? So that means that when I'm writing a summary, I'm going to use transitional language that reiterates where this material came from. In his article on, I don't know why I'm stuck on water retention, but that's what came to mind. In his article on water retention, Smith argues this. He continues by explaining this. He collects data from such and such a source. Furthermore, Smith concludes that, etc., etc. That kind of unifying transitional language helps your reader not to lose track of what you're doing. Without that transitional language, it becomes very confusing. Is what you're saying still summarizing this piece, or have you branched out into something different? And you don't want your reader to be confused as to where the information they're reading, where that comes from. So, using consistent transitional language, tying each piece of data and information back to the author itself is going to be very, very helpful into creating a really cohesive, unifying summary. Okay, so by way of reiterating, I want to remind you that the rules regarding summarizing taking a big piece of information and boiling it down to its basics, to the basic message that's most important. The 5 rules for doing that is to keep it short, keep it inclusive, keep it thesis driven, eliminate direct quotations, and be consistent in referencing the author and transitioning from thought to thought. This is a tricky assignment, I know, but it's really, really good practice. It'll also help you by becoming the first entry into your annotated bibliography, which will be due at the end of the course. And I hope that you find it to be helpful in kind of getting you into the genre of what academic research writing looks like. Okay, again, I apologize for the technical difficulties surrounding this week's lecture. I hope that this is helpful for you, and I wish you a great end to your week. Talk to you all soon.